Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to this Q&A of HBO Max's Equal Episode 2, Transgender Pioneers. I want to take a moment so the rest of our lovely panel can come on. And there we are. Hello, everyone. Hello. Thank you for coming today. Before we get started with Q&A, I just want to take a minute and have everyone introduce themselves, and explain how you're connected to the production. So why don't we start?
Thanks, Kiana. I'm Jenni Olson. I'm an archival producer and story consultant on the entire 4 episodes of Equal. I had a special involvement with this episode, and I'm really excited to talk to everyone about it. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Grey, and I play Lucy Hicks Anderson. And in episode 2, and I'm so excited to be joining you guys today.
Hey, I'm Kimberly Reed. I'm the director, writer for episode 2. Can't wait to have a discussion about this. Thanks, everyone.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jamie Clayton, and I am playing Christine Jorgensen in episode 2 of Equal on HBO Max.
Well, thank you, everyone, for introducing yourself. And let's just dive right in. The first question I want to ask, it kind of relates to me and growing up and remembering the first time I saw a film that resonated with me and saw myself on the screen. And so this goes to all of you to answer this question. Why, of course, is it important to tell these stories? And so why don't we start with Kimberly, please?
So the showrunner and director of the other episodes, his name's Stephen Kayak. He's a longtime friend. He came to me with these stories about these early LGBT heroes, and right from the outset, he knew that he wanted to have one of the episodes be about trans pioneers. And even though it's kind of difficult to project these terms that we use today back on people before these terms were developed, I think in large part that we've been around forever. As long as people have been around, people have been kind of blurring the boundaries of gender. And we wanted to tell those stories about people who, we're pretty sure, we don't want to make decisions for anybody else, but we're pretty sure they would have identified as trans. And it's important to tell the stories because I think a lot of times we think that queer history started, there's my dog, queer history started at Stonewall, and we just kind of popped out of the woodwork at that point. And it's clear that there are people who have been expressing themselves and their true gender for longer than we can imagine. And it was really fun to work with this great cast of people and with the research that Jenni was doing to help us uncover some of these stories so that we can just show that, we've been around as long as people have been around.
Can I just say, Kim, you did such a beautiful job in the writing and the directing and structuring the episode in this way that really calls attention to this idea of, like you're saying, this has always been, people have always been here, but that they were alone and, didn't have the kind of community that we have today. And it's so beautiful. It's so moving. The visual representation, of each of them stepping into the spotlight, and that sense of, like, oh my God, if they knew that, if Jack knew that Lucy was there, if Lucy knew that Jack was there. Obviously, Christine, that you have like the beginning of a sense of connection, and then obviously the Queens and Queers of Compton's, where you we come to the sense of real community. Can I just say something? I just feel like I just want to acknowledge that tonight, you know, if they were here, they would be out in the streets calling for justice for Breonna Taylor. And I just feel like I have to say that. And we can go back to everything. But if I'm moved by that idea, and they're just such amazing heroes. And Alexandra and Jenni, you did such a beautiful job and bringing them to life. And I also want to acknowledge Theo Germain, who's not with us, who portrayed Jack, and Isis King, who did such a great job as our kind of, you know, Compton's composite character. And of course, Billy Porter as our narrator. But I'm sure everyone wants to hear from Alexandra and Jamie.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I'll just say my heart is really heavy today as well. As a person of color, I'm really disappointed in our justice system, and that Breonna Taylor's murderers, you know, are not going to be charged. I think it's really disappointing. And so, to answer the question of, you know, why get involved with this project and why these stories are so important, it's because of stuff like this. You know, it's 2020, and you know, these characters that we are portraying. I portrayed Lucy Hicks Anderson. I had never heard of her before this project, and it's unfortunate because I'm sure there are so many untold stories of LGBTQ icons, and especially trans women of color and trans women whose stories we don't hear about often. And so I was really, really happy to be a part of the project. I remember being so emotional on my first day of set because I felt like I was just transported back into 1945 and what it would be like to exist as an African-American person. And not only that, but to be trans as well. And so, yeah, I think it's so important. I think this is a great time for it with everything that's going on in the world. I think it's so important.
I'll jump in.
Yeah.
I like sort of piggybacking off of what Kimberly said. You know, it's so true. You know, that it's the importance of these stories is really heavy for me because, you know, we didn't just pop out like after Stonewall. So many people know Stonewall, and, you know, there's so much talk about that, and, you know, movies have portrayed it completely historically incorrectly, and you know, it's important to know that the history of these people, I think especially trans people, goes so far back. You know, trans people are not new. We've been around for forever. We're not going anywhere. And I'm a bit of a stickler, you know, for paying homage to the folks that have come before me, because I know in my heart and soul that I would not be able to do everything that I'm doing, including just walking down the street and shopping at the supermarket, if it weren't for these people like Lucy and Jack and Christine, who have paved the way to change the public's view of what and who we are. And that's why, I mean, I love, you know, I'd heard of Christine. I didn't know a lot about her. So it was really nice to get to sort of dive into her story. And those of you that have seen now the episode 2, there's all these letters and beautiful things, which I wasn't aware of. But yeah, I think it's important, you know, to especially younger trans people to, you know, have a sort of frame of reference that this isn't something new, and it's really, you know, like I look up to people like Laverne Cox and Candace Payne, you know, who've had these careers, and I wouldn't have mine if it wasn't for them, but I wouldn't have livelihood, my life, if it weren't for people like, again, like Jack and Christine and Lucy and, you know, Richards and Caroline Coffey and these trans people who have come before. So that's why for me it's very important.
Thank you. And you touched on something that really, you know, in the world we live in with technology and media, and information at our fingertips. It's a different era when you think about these individuals and what they had to deal with, and this probably overwhelming sense of loneliness. I could only imagine, this is just like me putting, you know, of course, my own emotions onto someone else, but I could only imagine getting this overwhelming sense of loneliness because there's no one around you and there's no way to find anyone around you at that time. With Jenni, then I kind of want to talk to you about what is the process of an archival producer? Like, what is this process of consulting? Because you don't have the media, you don't have this in your fingertips, you don't have this hard drive you can like go to and snap pictures and pull things up. And so what was that process like in digging all of this up and finding this information and this treasure?
Thanks. We dealt with dozens and dozens of archives, and there's certainly some footage that people will recognize from having been used in other documentaries because there are just limited number of images. But we worked really hard, and the whole team, and dug in and found a lot of stuff that really significant discoveries of things, especially from the kind of early and mid 60s. And of course, there was so much footage that we couldn't fit in, which is disappointing. There's so much great stuff. And but I particularly, my kind of special connection to this episode is around Jack, the Jack Starr character, who, so I'm just going to show you this. This is the original photo of him. I get without the reflection that I discovered. And this is his, like, it's from a it's a wire service news photo. I found this a couple years ago and became obsessed with him. So he was not a figure that really anyone knew about as a queer pioneer. So I researched him like crazy, particularly in old newspapers. And he was this amazing figure. He was arrested repeatedly throughout the 20s, 30s, and 40s for passing as a man. And he had, and there are like front page court cases, stories in, particularly, he was in Montana. And so there are all these stories in the Montana newspapers of, oh, Jack Starr is in jail again. And like really amazing things where the judge said, okay, we'll let you out of jail, but you have to wear women's clothes. And the paper literally reports him saying, it would kill me to wear women's clothes. And saying like, that's okay, don't let me out of jail then, because I'm not going to wear women's clothes. And anyway, it's just this incredible story. I wish that we could have done an entire episode about him. And in the research, doing this research, there were hundreds of people like Jack throughout, I mean, this just, the 20th century, but, going far, far back, who, were assigned female at birth and lived as men. And anyway, so, this episode, cramming into 40 minutes, all this history, I think Jack, stands for, represents, he represents, thousands and thousands of people throughout history who we don't know anything about. It was really powerful to tell.
And if I can say real quickly, I mean, Jack not only represents some of the male identified people who we unfortunately can't have Theo here today, and the people like Jack Starr that he represented, but I just have to say that Jenni is a legendary researcher in the documentary film community, and we were so lucky to have her on this project. And there's so many things. I don't know. I hope Jenni, that there were like there's some footage from, there's a film called Queens at Heart, which is beautiful. And I don't know that anybody has ever seen this footage. And I'm so glad that we can bring all of your digging and your treasures, and just bring everything to wider audiences, because I don't know, you have just been doing this so diligently, and I'm glad we get a chance to show it.
Thanks, Kim.
Yeah, thank you. This question, you touched upon it. Unfortunately, we don't have someone here to represent Jack, but we do have two actresses here to represent Lucy and Christine. And so first to Jamie and then Alexandria, like, what did you do to prepare for these characters? Like, what did you do to embody this role and bring it to life so that someone somewhere watching this cannot feel alone, can feel connection to the community? Because sometimes, as we know, the only connection you have is through a movie, through a TV show that you're watching. And so how did you go about preparing for it?
Personally, for Christine, it was a challenge as an actor, in the sense that there was a lot of audio of Christine. So I felt a responsibility to sort of do the best that I could when I was, sort of narrating all of those letters and things of hers. So I took a deep dive on the internet and listened to so many interviews that she had done, like on talk shows and things like that. So I listened to her voice over and over and over and over and over. And then, the costume people and the hair and makeup people were incredible on the series, but I was very hands-on, in the sense that, I was like, let's do like these gloves with this, with that, and and then I even lined my lips because I wanted the lip liner to be the way that they, she did the lip liner, which it's a very period sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so as far as preparing, it was just a lot of listening to her voice, and then once I got there on set that day, we did everything in one day, and everyone was incredible. And Jenny knew like exactly, Kimberly knew exactly what like was going to be happening, and everyone explained everything to me. And it's to see it all come. My brain doesn't really work in the sense that like I can, like there's a random staircase like on this set, like with the carpet, and it's just like a staircase, and I'm like, my brain doesn't work in the way that I can like see how that's going to come together, like the episode, and they kept saying like it's going to be gorgeous, it's going to be gorgeous. Okay. And so to see the episode, I'm like, oh wow, they did such like an incredible job piecing together those reenactments and then my voiceovers to go along with the interviews. It made it so special, and I was really happy that everybody wanted to include that sort of component in this, instead of just having the archive footage and the interviews and things like that. It made it a lot more special, especially when I was watching Alexandra play Lucy. It brought it to life for me, and with Jack too. With Theo, the way that he, would move around those rooms, like as Jack, like that little hotel, it really brought it to life. So so that's how I prepared, and I think I hope you like it.
And Jamie, thank you so much for mentioning my name. I also have to throw in the name of our great story team during post-production, and that was Natasha Bedu, our editor, who's a great editor, and our story producer, Chrissy Dodson. We had a really, really good team that did a lot of research and allowed us to pull out those stories.
Thank you, Natasha and Chrissy.
Yeah, I think for me, this was my first project of the year. And so I really wanted to, at the start of each year, I always want to challenge myself as an artist and grow in different ways. And so with this being a role, I'm only 29, but I think at the time I was portraying Lucy, she was 45. So I really felt, I didn't feel it to be a challenge because I played older before, but I did want to just step into that character and embody a 45-year-old, Midwestern woman. And I didn't have a lot of, like, I think like Christine Jorgensen, I think, she was very, very like famous and celebrity. So there's a lot of things in the archive. But with Lucy, I didn't have much to go on because, she, lived a pretty quiet life toward the end. And so for me, I just kind of used my own life as a Black trans woman and growing up in the Midwest in a small town. And I think everything just came together so beautifully. I mean, the first day on set, I think we filmed, it was outdoor, it was supposed to be her hometown, I think. And it was just, I remember Kimberly and I were just vibing so hard because I could not stop crying. I mean, I think every single take I was crying because I felt like I was in the color purple. I felt like I really felt, it was the first time on set that I had felt like I was just in that world. I felt like I was in 1945 thinking about my life and how scary this whole thing is, and they won't let me live my life, and it was just so beautiful. So I haven't seen it yet, so I'm excited to see it. But
you're
You are so good. You should watch it. It is beautiful. Exactly what both you and Jamie said. The imagery is amazing. The way you tell the stories, Kimberly, has been brilliant. I know I don't have a ton of time to go into a whole bunch, but one of the questions was even how you found these people to like, why focus on these three individuals, as we're all aware, we've been around forever. And so how did you figure out how to focus on these particular people and make them beautiful?
It's such a hard part about nonfiction filmmaking is that people call it casting, but I don't really like that term because these are real people. We're just talking about their lives. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we definitely wanted to have some male identified people and some people on female identified. You pretty much have to talk about Christine Jorgensen, so it was clear from the beginning that was going to be a component of it. But from early on, and again, going back to Jenni's research, it was also important for us to talk about people that we didn't know about, just almost randomly plucking somebody out of anonymity was a quality of the storytelling that I really liked, and that's what the character of Jack does. A few have heard about Lucy's story. It wasn't widely publicized either, and that was also super important to tell her story. It was important to tell the story of people of color at the time. And, you just kind of end up with the mix that sort of works the best. And they also kind of counteracted each other's stories too. One last quick thing, because I want to hear more from y'all. But Christine was super famous, and she was super famous in a pretty uncomfortable way. Mm-hmm. And normally when people talk about famous, like, oh, that's what you want, and there you go, you got it, everything's good. But she was thrust into the limelight in a way that was pretty uncomfortable, and she was very difficult to negotiate at the time. And I think she did a really magnificent job of doing that. And then you kind of you have a kind of bookend that story with these two other stories of folks who probably would have self-identified as trans at the time, who were relatively anonymous and only kind of popped into headlines in this really, kind of sensationalistic way that the media was covering them at the time. So telling that story about fame and kind of the underbelly of fame, as well as telling the story of anonymity and how people who chose to be anonymous got dragged out of that anonymity into the headlines was an interesting contrast to play with.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can I just say, just to underscore that, I think one of the greatest achievements Kim, in your writing, and Jamie and Alexandra in your performances, is that the characters, this could easily have been this kind of like horrible stories, but we come across, we feel the, poignant and dignity of the characters and the their this sense of inspiration and uplift and triumph and and like kind of like fuck you.
Yeah.
and it comes together so beautifully, and then obviously tying in the Isis King character at Compton's and the way that you bookend it with that, and we feel the begin and such a, I don't know, I love how empowered the entire thing feels when it and not tragic.
Yeah, it does. It is very empowering. We'll take some questions from the audience after I ask my next question. So anyone watching, please post your questions as a comment, and we will ask the panel the questions. And so I will ask my last question before taking questions from the audience. What is the message that you hope to deliver when someone watches this episode and this series, right? This is only the second episode in the series, but what do you hope that people pull, learn, experience from it when they watch it? And I will go in the opposite order than I started this conversation. So Jamie, please go first.
I think that my hope would be that people, not just queer people, all people, cis, trans, straight, gay, bi, like everybody all across every rainbow, every binary, if they watch this, like I hope that they watch it and get a sense that our histories do go back so much further than we know. And you mentioned, Kiana, beautifully, that you didn't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but you said that you guessed that there was probably this sense of loneliness with these people. I think the same thing.
Yeah.
I've experienced incredible loneliness, as a trans person. I mean, when I started transitioning, there was no internet. And now with young people, there's, with Instagram and Twitter and all those things, they can find community and they can find each other. And that's really great. But, like I said before, I'm sort of a stickler for, understanding our history and where we come from. So I hope that people watch this and that they understand that again, like we've been around for a very long time, that our stories are so diverse, that trans doesn't mean or look like one thing. And everything that you think you know about trans, it's a grain of sand, like on the biggest beach of transness. And so keep absorbing and keep learning and keep growing and keep an open mind. If you're watching Equal, you have an open mind. And so keep that way and share it with people.
That's a great one. I think backwards would be Kimberly next. Is that right?
I think it was Alexandra, but I'll jump in, and if you want, no, you're right, it is me. I'm always backwards, even when we're going backwards. I love the word dignity that Jenni mentioned, and there is some tragedy in these people's lives, but come on, we've all heard enough stories that, like the tragic stories about the trans people who got to suffer a lot. And I think, the aim of this episode was not only to dignify these early examples of trans heroes, but I have to talk about Stephen Kayak, the showrunner and director of the other episodes, and the producers, Diane and Mel. We talked about the whole time about just making sure that this whole series had this trajectory that was dignifying LGBTQIA people, that was kind of empowering the community and kind of force if you look at the whole series, which I hope you all get a chance to, it's all kind of building up in this momentum that is this dignified, empowering, revolutionary moment that happens at Stonewall. I mean, that's really the structure of the whole episode, of the whole series.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think too, more so what Jamie was saying, just about, I want all folk out there, specifically to this episode, I just want them to know that we do have history, and that there are people that have come before us, and I think Jamie was saying earlier too about just being so grateful to the people who have come before us, paved the way, and to hear about someone like Lucy. I think it's so groundbreaking to be so fearless, when it just wasn't fashionable. And I hope people just really watch the series. And I think it's done in such a way to where it's entertaining, but it's also very, just very rich and fulfilling. And so that's my hope. And Issa Rae always says, I'm rooting for everyone Black. I'm rooting for everyone who's a part of this community. I'm rooting for all of us to just have more stories like this told, and to just see us more and more out there, because I think it's so important.
I echo everything you all said. I think, Jack is this really interesting figure to me, as I currently would, I identify as a butch dyke. I always have felt like, I don't know, I'm different. I'm gender nonconforming. It's so interesting to me that there is this kind of odd quality of the binary between trans and non-trans. And one of my kids told me a couple of years ago, she was like, you do realize that you're not cis. and I was like, wow, you're right. When I leave San Francisco, I have to prepare to be that I'm perceived as male. And so, and anyway, I just always have this sense that, there is a kinship. I have my she, her TBD, like, who knows? And so I hope that people do also take away, just this kind of sense of kinship, and connection to different kinds of gender stuff. That's my inarticulate, Yeah.
We understood it though. We caught it, we picked it up, and we caught it for you. So we're here. You're welcome. Some questions from the audience. Kimberly actually, there she goes. This is open. I don't know who would be able to answer it, but the music, the imagery, and the cinematography is beautiful, as well as the archival footage that you happen to find. Don't know where you got it from. You probably have a deal with somebody somewhere to get this amazing stuff. But the music is also an element that people don't pay attention to enough. When music is an element that people don't pay attention to enough when a project is coming out. Can anyone speak on the music while Kimberly is gone, or I can ask another question? Oh,
there she is.
Sorry about that. I think I have the tail. Are y'all asking about the music?
Yes, that is correct.
So I'm sorry I missed the question, but one of the things I love about this production is that, we have a lot of trans folk in front of the camera. We also had a lot of trans folk behind the camera. I'm trans. The DP, Ava Benjamin Shore, was trans. A lot of the department heads, audio department, like it was there. It wasn't, just on the other side of the lens. And the music that you hear, including the awesome opening music for each episode, was from Shade Diamond. I hope you all get a chance to hear that. It's my It's a great way to start off each episode. Laura Jane Grace provided some music. Octa. I mean, we have a lot of trans-identified artists, music artists who were given the score, and and many people have mentioned the beautiful cinematography, and Ava just did a fantastic job with it. Just gorgeous.
Lovely. I only have time for one final question. I'm sorry. I know we could talk for hours, and so I will choose the question that everyone is wondering. What is everyone working on next?
Should we go in reverse order again?
You know what? I will break the mold.
Do it.
Alexandra, please start first.
Okay. Well, what am I working on? Well, I have a film out, which is we're like doing the whole festival thing right now. It's called Gospel Folds. And I'm the lead of the film, and it's a feature, and so I'm really excited to see what happens. It's been received pretty well, so I'm kind of working on that. And you know what, doing lots of auditioning, and still taking one day at a time in this business, and just breaking down those barriers for the next girl coming after me. So
that's right.
Yeah,
I love Gossamer, by the way. I have seen it.
Thank you.
Yes, Jenni.
I'll just jump in. Well, let's see. I'm working on all kinds of things, but and so I'm also a filmmaker, and maybe I'll make another film. I don't know. I actually just finished a book though, and books is so much cheaper and easier, and so yeah. Wish me luck with that.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck. Books require a lot of time, just as much as any other content you create.
They're less expensive than films.
You were correct.
Jamie?
So I think it's okay if I say I will be back as Tess Vanderberg on season 2 of the L Word Generation Q, which is very exciting. And fingers crossed that Charlie Cameron will be back on season 3 of Roswell, New Mexico. We're still working that out. And then I have another project that I can't talk about yet, but there's another that I've booked that I'm very excited about, and I can't wait for everyone to hear about it. So there's those 3 shows. And then, but the most, the thing that's going to come out the soonest will be Equal on HBO Max. I'm in episode 2. It's out October 22nd. Only on HBO Max. So watch me as Christine Jorgensen in Equal. Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
I've heard about that. That sounds really cool. I'll have to check that out.
Cool. You should check it out. The music's great. The director's amazing.
The cast is great as well.
Yeah, the cast is
the whole team behind the scenes, behind the cameras, genius.
I actually, I'm working on, I think this is coming up very, very soon, because I was the executive producer for a film called Transhood, which is in Frameline. So you should check that out if you get a chance to see it. It's about 4 trans, non-binary kids growing up in Kansas City. And it's shot over 5 years. So it just shows what they go through growing up trans in the middle of America. And I'm also, they just, Sundance just announced funding for a round of development for a new project I'm working on, which is about gender. And it's about gender and science, and where that intersection is, because we all think it's sort of very black and white, how people, sex is determined at birth. And there's a lot more gray areas there than any of us know. And it's really interesting and fascinating and mind-blowing. So we're going to make a film about that.
Well, thank you all. I just want to take a moment and say thank you all. This was a great Q&A. Please don't forget to continue to watch HBO Max's series Equal. This is episode 2, but there are many more. And Jenni, you had mentioned this at the beginning, and I just want to also take a moment for all of us to acknowledge Breonna Taylor and the injustice against Black and brown bodies, and the fight that people have to go through continuously just to get the respect and the safety that we all in America should have as trans individuals. We know of that. As Black and brown individuals, we know of that. And it's just, it is awful that we in 2020 have to deal with this. So thank you all for coming out. Oh, yes.
Can I also just suggest that folks can tune in tomorrow for the 3rd episode of Equal, which showcases the stories of Bayard Rustin and Lorraine Hansberry, among others, and is also a really beautiful episode.
Is it episode 3, Black is Beautiful, Gay is Good?
Yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Frameline.
Thanks everyone. It's great seeing y'all. Thanks, Frameline.
Thanks, Frameline.